right. Chris, thanks so much for joining us today. You are my very first guest on the show, and you are a writer for the Minnesota Timberwolves at the Star Tribune. Before the Star Tribune, you previously spent the last 8 years covering college sport and the Chicago Blackhawks in NHL. In 2023, you were recognized on the Outsports Power 100, where they named the most influential LG in sports. You just wrapped up your sixth season with the Minnesota Timberwolves, and I do see that you're also a big Mariah Carey and Carol's King stan. Welcome to the show, Chris.
That's right. That last part, probably the most
Is that
important
right?
part. Yes.
For sure. For
That's
sure. I
right.
appreciate you taking your time out of your day and your vacation summer to hop on this pod with me and Shot Clock Scribbles. We'll go ahead and get started here. First, can you tell us about your journey into sports journalism and how you became a writer covering the Minnesota Timberwolves for the Star Tribune?
Yeah, so I started kind of in sports writing in college, and I wrote for the school newspaper at Notre Dame where I went to school. And, kind of through that, I went through the journalism program and was fortunate to get some internships that led to my first job in Chicago. And I worked there for 8 years, worked for a lot of really good people, did a lot of really cool things. And then about 6 years ago, the Star Tribune had an opening. And I just kind of went for it. And, they liked me. They liked what I had to offer. And at first they didn't hire me to be the Timberwolves writer. They hired me for a whole other job. It was like this sports feature writing job, analytics reporting, all this kind of stuff. And then about a year in, we're like, we really like you to cover the Timberwolves. I feel like I have to sneeze.
Yeah, you're
right
good. Do what you got to do.
If you hear me pausing, it's because I'm like in between sneezes. It's a very awkward feeling right now as I'm trying to talk. I think it's past now. Like there was like 5 seconds there where I felt like I had to really sneeze. But anyway, so they came to me and said, we'd really like you to cover the Timberwolves. And I was like, sure, let's do it. I've always wanted to cover the NBA. I've loved basketball since I was a kid. My dad was a high school basketball coach for a long time. So I grew up with a basketball in my hand and a hoop in the backyard. I've always loved it. And this was, I always dreamed of being in the NBA. This was like kind of a roundabout way of doing it, right? Not really in the NBA, but like kind of tangentially related to it.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. That's awesome. Thanks for that insight. And does it almost feel like you're living in a La La Land? Like, oh man, like I get to go to the games and cover the games. Do you almost feel like in awe with your job and what you get to see in your day-to-day?
I think you try to appreciate that as a sports writer when this is your job. I think a lot of times in this profession, as with any job, it feels like a job at times, right? Like no matter where you are, even if you're watching basketball, you still have a job to do. You still have deadlines to meet and the stresses of work, right? But at the end of the day, like when you're walking into an arena and it's an NBA playoff game, like it's like, this is, you have to remind yourself, this is pretty cool. This is pretty cool, and try to enjoy it. Try to enjoy the moment as much as you can.
And especially with the Timberwolves going later in the playoffs as they did this past season, I'm sure the city was buzzing there with how amazing they did throughout the playoffs and beating the Nuggets and sweeping the Suns, which I don't know if anybody saw happening, but that was just insane.
It was a lot of fun to see the city really get behind the team and really, it's a very fun thing that happens. I experienced it in Chicago with the Blackhawks, and then when the Cubs won the World Series in 2016, just to feel the energy of the entire city kind of get behind a team. Like it's a feeling unlike any other, and the deeper they go in the playoffs, the more that gets amplified. It was just a very cool thing to see, and for their sake, you hope that they can keep it going longer, because I think it was just a lot of fun for everybody in the city, whether you're a diehard fan, whether you're a casual fan, just getting to know the team.
Yeah,
it's a very fun experience.
I understood that. And I had a follow-up question to my question, since you answered one of my questions. Is when you were at Notre Dame, what was your most memorable moment, sports moment?
When I was there? Oh, that's an interesting question. There weren't a ton.
The Fighting Irish.
The football team, it's pretty easy. This was
Hmm.
just as a student
Sure.
and as a fan before I started writing. My freshman year was 2005, and that was the year of the quote unquote Bush push game. So I was in the stands for when Reggie Bush pushed Matt Leinart across the goal line in the final on the final play of the game to win it for USC. I was there in the crowd that day. I was at the opposite. The student section was in the opposite end zone, so we had a far view of what was happening. But Notre Dame was winning late in that game, and USC drove down in the last minute and won it. And so that was the most
Yeah.
memorable game
That's a
attended
pretty
there.
memorable
Yeah,
game then, because yeah, a
it's a
lot of
pretty good
history
one. Yeah,
there.
it's. I mean, of course, it's a Notre Dame loss, but it's a pretty
Yeah,
good
for
memory.
sure.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna now switch gears here. I recently read on your most recent piece that you published on Friday that there seems to be a lot of optimism within the Timberwolves locker room. You have Michael Conley Jr. saying that this one stung more so than getting beat by the Lakers last year. And then you have Ant talking about, hey, this offseason, I need to work on my body and really push my body so that it's sustainable for a late playoff push. Then you have Carl Towns saying that he loves the city and he's looking forward to being back there with his brothers. So talk to me about how the Timberwolves players are feeling. Obviously, it sucks to lose in the conference finals, but talk to me how that felt within the organization.
Yeah, initially when your season ends, I think it takes a while. It takes a while to kind of pick up the pieces and get over it. But as time goes on, you start to appreciate, I think, more of the good than the bad. I think, they're kind of entering that phase right now. Everybody's getting a little break now and they'll reconvene eventually here. But I think when you look at their season as a whole, and this is the job of Tim Connolly as the president and GM, there's a lot of good there. And you don't want to overreact to, maybe a bad week against the Mavericks when guys were admitting that they were kind of gassed and tired and mentally spent. You see it on social media all the time. It lose to the Mavericks, and it's like, fire the coach. This guy needs to be traded. They need this. They need that. This is the sports ecosystem that we live in, right? But I think Tim Connolly has made his mark in the NBA on doing the opposite, and that's essentially when you feel like you have the right pieces in place, you let it kind of marinate and grow together. And yeah, that might mean some failure and coming up short. But with the Denver Nuggets, the team that he previously built, they eventually turned into a title winner. When you reach this stage of the NBA playoffs, you are essentially a title contending team when you reach the conference finals. So I think that's going to be kind of where they go this offseason. Despite all the disappointment, despite what went wrong in the Dallas series, I don't think they feel like
So basically, what I'm hearing you say is just because you lost and didn't win a title doesn't mean you need to start from scratch and start it all over again. Is you already have the pieces there, and you don't really need to do too much with your roster because you're a pretty damn solid team already as it is.
that's pretty much it. Yeah, it's maybe finding one or two additions on the margins that can help you out, and you just go from there. But I think you have all the makes in place.
I totally agree. We're gonna now switch gears and talk about your career and your journey, and then the Timberwolves here is. Can you tell us your sports journey into sports journalism and how you became a writer covering the Timberwolves for the Star Tribune?
It was just, I've always just had an interest in writing. It's been something that I just pursued all throughout college, and I was just lucky to have some very good people along the way helping me out and trying to help me get a job or two, and got some internships. It was a great support system I had when I was younger. Very thankful for those that helped me get to where I am today. I covered a lot of different sports, and I covered college football, I covered college basketball, I covered hockey. I've covered an Olympics before. I covered the 2016 Olympics for the Chicago Tribune when I was there.
Okay.
That was a great experience. And then, yeah, when Minneapolis just had an opening here, I went for it and they liked me. And it's been a wild ride. Like, my first week on the beat covering the Timberwolves was the week that Jimmy Butler came in and like
Oh
blew up
wow!
practice.
Oh wow! It was run that time, huh?
That was week one
Oh
on the beat for
wow!
me 6 years
Wow!
ago. Yeah, that was crazy. It was like very much a welcome to the
Oh my
NBA kind of
God. Oh
moment,
my
you know?
God. Yes. Yes. And Tim Thibodeau
Yeah.
was the coach, right?
Yes, yeah.
Oh
Thibodeau was the
man.
coach there, dude. Yeah, good
Oh
times.
man. That's crazy.
It was
No,
crazy.
that's wild. You spoke about the Olympics. I didn't really have this on my notes, but can you tell us what that looked like and your experience covering the
Oh,
Olympics?
that's like the most intense thing you can do as a sports writer because it's like there are events happening
Yeah.
at all times of the day. So you might have to cover an event somewhere in the morning. You might have to cover an event somewhere in the afternoon, and then you might have to be somewhere at night to cover it. There are times where you're covering three different things in one day. So you're just going from like 6, 7 in the morning to like 12 midnight, 1 a.m. and you're just covering stuff and writing and getting on buses and getting kind of shepherded around to all the venues. And it's
Yeah.
intense. It's very intense. Having
Wow.
done an Olympics now, I would go back and do things a little differently in time too, but I know what to expect now if I were ever to get the opportunity to
Yeah.
cover another Olympics. But it was fun. You're covering track and field. At one point, I was
Oh
covering
wow.
swimming events. I got to see Michael Phelps swim in
That's awesome.
person, to see him win a couple events. I covered the USA basketball, men's and women's there, and yeah, your beach volleyball, which was really cool on the
Hmm.
beach in Rio. It's
Yeah.
like just the venue. Having beach volleyball on the beach in Rio de Janeiro was like the most
Yeah.
picturesque setting
No, that's
you could ever
sweet.
ask for. So it was a really
No,
fun
that's what's
experience,
up.
really
That's
fun
what's up. Yeah, the
experience.
city of God, as they say.
Mhm, mhm,
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
mhm.
Speaking about the Olympics, I'll get you out on this last one before I move on to Anthony Edwards here. Is this summer, Olympics, Paris, USA, team basketball. What do you think? Are they going to get the gold this year? What are your predictions on that one?
I think so. I think so. I think there's too much talent there. There's too much experience there. I think where the USA tends to get in trouble is when you have younger players who maybe haven't really done it or just don't know how to adjust their games accordingly for international play. I think this team has enough of that I think they're going to be able to pull it out. They have enough defense. They have size. They have shooting. They've got everything. It's the best. It's the best players in the NBA that are American, right? So it. I think they got to be the heavy
I
end for
totally
sure.
agree. You named it all. They have size, they have shooting,
Mhm,
you have coaching, Steve Kerr. They have the recipe to win this.
mhm.
And yeah, they need to win. And a controversial pick by Grant Hill is picking Kawhi Leonard. And as we saw, Kawhi didn't really play too much in that first round. And he accepted the invite. And I had my take on it. I didn't think that Kawhi should have accepted that, especially since he wasn't 100%. But I do get it. It was months later that the Olympics was going to be held there in Paris. But do you believe Kawhi should have accepted that invite?
If they invited you and you think you're
Yeah,
capable enough to play,
gotcha.
then and you want to do it, then why not say yes? Like that's kind of where I stand. If you feel like that, because I think it's a fun experience. It's something that comes along only once every 4 years. You might not get the opportunity
Yeah.
to do it again. We'll see where he's at health wise, and I'm sure they have a backup plan should he not
Hmm.
be able to go or not want to test the knee out. But yeah,
Yeah,
I had no issue with him
gotcha,
saying yes to
gotcha.
that.
All right, we'll now move on to Anthony Edwards. He's been talked about this whole season, really impressed a lot of people, really making a name for himself. He's himself, authentic, 100%. Players love him, fans love him. It's really been his coming out party, especially in that first series against the Suns, talking trash to one of his childhood idols and Kevin Durant. You've been around him for quite a while since he got drafted in 2020. So, the last 4 years since he came to the league. Talk to me a little bit more about, and I know you visited Georgia and his roots and got to learn a little bit more about him. We'll talk about something that you got working in the future here. But talk to me about Anthony Edwards, man.
Well, I think what you see is what you get with Anthony Edwards. This is kind of who he is at all times. I think that's what draws people to him is that whether the cameras are rolling or not, he's authentically, himself. He brings a lot of positive energy into the building every day, helps lift up his teammates and makes the Timberwolves facility a good place to come in and work. And when you have that kind of attitude affecting the whole team, that's leadership in its own way, right? It's not like rah rah sort of leadership that we think of, but like when you're the best player and you just have an attitude of, I'm going to work hard and I'm going to have fun doing it, carries along the rest of the team with it. I think his positive personality can't be, especially when it comes to like uplifting his teammates, like Karl Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert, who people love to pick on social media and things like that, oftentimes unfairly,
Yeah.
I might add. But when Anthony Edwards, who's the star of the team, the young star, when he's the one that's lifting up those guys and like basically saying, hey, these are my teammates. I love all my teammates, no matter what. No matter what you may say about them, these are my teammates, and we're gonna win together. It's a huge thing to have as a young player, and not buy into the internet hype and negativity that maybe could affect the minds of
Yeah,
other
100%.
players.
I feel like you nailed that 100%. I feel like with the leadership, he's only what, 21, 22 years old. This guy, 22, man.
22, yeah,
That's just
yeah.
crazy. And for him to lead this Minnesota Timberwolves with a team full of veteran leadership too, as well. Kyle Anderson, Mike Conley. You have a lot of pieces there that have been in the league for quite a minute. And also just the way that he plays on the court. I think the biggest thing that really impresses a lot of players, former players and people who cover the game, is he can play on both sides of the ball. He's just not an offensive juggernaut. He's not looking to put up 30 shots a night and on the other end, guard maybe not their best player and taking possessions off. Like he's on it all the time and he wants to be the best. I think that's why a lot of people are so gravitated towards him. And we've heard this whole thing about Michael Jordan comparison. What are your thoughts on this? I've heard him talk about it like, hey, like I don't want to be compared. And then in the past too, I've heard him play around with it as well. What are your thoughts?
I think it depends on the day if you ask him about that, how he
Yeah.
feels about it. He might feel differently one day than the next. I think it's undeniable some of just the physical, stylistic things in their games. When you see like side by side comparisons of like his fadeaway and MJ's fadeaway, or like
Yeah.
stuff like that, right? I think it's fair to say that, but I think I don't think that that's a bad thing necessarily to say. Obviously, it comes with the caveat of Michael Jordan has won 6 titles, one of the greatest, if not the greatest players of all time. A long way to go for Anthony Edwards to ever get to that point. I think the competitive drive is there for Ant. I think the work ethic is there. He's still just 22 years old. And I think you saw that in the Dallas series that part of growing and maturing in the game and why it's very hard for somebody who's 22 to break through and win a championship is you just need the reps. You need the reps. You need the experience. You need the experience figuring out what defenses are throwing at you in the postseason. And different teams, because of their different makeup, are going to be able to do different things to you in terms of schemes or strategies. And so Dallas had a combination of size and they had a very good defense and they flummoxed him, and a learning experience for him. And Michael Jordan went through it too. He had to go through loses to Bird Celtics in his rookie year, I think it was, or shortly in his career, I think quickly in his career. Then he famously loses to the Pistons multiple times in the playoffs before finally getting over that hump. It just kind of
Yeah.
happens that way in the NBA, right? It's the natural kind of rite of passage before you get to the top. You have to start climbing and then
Yeah.
fall a couple times before you can finally figure out how to get there.
1000%. Yeah, you gotta start somewhere. And he's just getting started. The FIBA World Cup the other summer, getting to play in those games and getting coached by Steve Kerr, seeing all the work ethic that, you need to have to be a greater player. It really seemed like he really turned on the engine this past season after conversations with Steve the other summer. But I think you're 100% right on that. Is he's just getting started. And Michael, Kobe as well, that series against the Utah Jazz early on in his career, I think he's got ways to go. And switching gears and talking about Ant here, I did see that you tweeted 6 days ago here, Chris, that you are working on a biography of Anthony Edwards. And I know it's probably a little bit too early to talk about it, but what can fans and
Mhm.
listeners of the show expect from this?
Yeah, very exciting. Just getting into the process now. It's going to be basically just his whole life, the whole 22 years. Early days growing up in Atlanta, teenage years, going to Georgia for a year, and then the 4 years so far in the NBA. I think we're going to try to break it up into sections here, with the NBA part kind of being its own separate section. So maybe that covers about half the book in his early life before the NBA covers the other half. So that's what I'm shooting for right now, and we'll see how that goes as the
Yeah.
process plays out. I'm very excited about it, and hopefully this time next year we'll have a book
Yeah,
in
no, that's
everybody's
awesome. No, I'm
hands.
looking forward to it. I mean, he's one of the most exciting players. Just waiting for it to definitely get out so they can get a little bit more insider perspective from you. So yeah, looking forward to that.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I just have to write the
That's
thing. That's
that. Yeah,
all.
that's the harder work, right?
That's the hard
Hmm.
part.
Yeah,
All that
no, for
stuff. Yep,
sure.
exactly.
Switching gears now and speaking about this offseason, big offseason for the Minnesota Timberwolves. It's no secret that their payroll is going to increase. You have Anthony Edwards, Cat, and Jaden McDaniels. Their kicker basically comes this summer. Anthony Edwards, his salary jumps up to $42.3 million. Jaden McDaniels, $22.5 million. Cat is owed $49.3 million. And Kyle Anderson as well. He's unrestricted free agent. Basically $190 million payroll, which essentially carries a burden of getting into the luxury tax here. And so my question to you, first and foremost, the first player that I want to talk about is Cat. You did mention he does get a lot of criticism. We've seen that on social media as well. People saying he's a duplicate player of Naz Reid, which I get the comparison, but they're two different players. I still think that you need Karl Anthony Towns there. He's probably one of the best shooting from three big men that we've ever seen in the league. And he's pretty confident in that statement. There's probably others that maybe have something to say about that. But what do you think about this offseason for particularly Cat?
So I would be surprised if Cat wasn't back this coming season for the Wolves. I think that his playoff performance, while he struggled in the Dallas series, they don't get to this point without him. I thought what he did in the Phoenix series, in basically kind of taking Durant one-on-one and kind of, I don't want to say sacrificing himself, so to speak, in that matchup, but he made it at least somewhat. He made Durant have to work a little bit, to the point where the Wolves were able to shut off the other parts of the Suns in that series. And then in the Denver series, he was their best one-on-one defender against Nikola
He
Jokic.
was.
Like, Cat has the bulk to withstand when Jokic tries to back somebody down from maybe like 10 feet out, and he tries to just back somebody down. We saw him backing Rudy down in that series, right? Carl was just
Yeah.
standing his ground, and he was making Jokic operate maybe a little farther out than he otherwise would have. And if you're the Minnesota Timberwolves, and you're any NBA team in the Western Conference right now, and you know that Nikola Jokic is going to likely be in your way to a championship or a deep playoff run in the near future, Karl Anthony Towns looks the best one-on-one defending Nikola Jokic than I think anybody in the league has been. And I include Anthony Davis in that statement too. I really do think that having Karl Anthony Towns on the defensive end of the floor for that Denver series was essential to Minnesota winning that series. And his offense came through in a huge way in Game 7 of that series as well. So I would be stunned, for anybody that watched that series, I would be stunned if you come away from that series and think that the Timberwolves should trade Karl Anthony Towns when Nikola Jokic is likely going to be back here in the playoffs for
Yeah.
years to come at
Yeah,
this
you
point.
summed that up pretty well. I think a lot of people on social media, they just, obviously with the Timberwolves going out, they have to point fingers at somebody. And you're 100% right, is he does get a lot of the blame. You saw some of the TNT cast say, oh, hey, you're not shooting 1,500 shots and this, that, and the third. But the truth is, in the West, you need size. Look at Sacramento here, where that's essentially what they need to do in this offseason. You definitely need that in the West. When you have Jokic like that, you do need some good size. Cat was the best one that guarded him. I think another player that defended him very good this season too was Zubac over in Los Angeles as well. He really stood his ground. There was that game that the Clippers played at home and they beat the Nuggets that game. That was before the All-Star break, before they lost 3-4 straight going into the All-Star break. To your case in point is, yeah, you don't get rid of Cat at all. That would be silly.
Yeah, if that's what I mean. It's so if you trade Cat, you have to then answer the follow-up question, which is what do you get in return for him? And how does that improve your roster over just getting rid of
Yep.
him? It is not an addition by subtraction sort of thing. You can't just look at it that way. You have to figure out what does that trade look like? What does the market look like? And is it materially better? And does it make your team better right now when you have a championship window and you have a chance to win a title? Does it make your team better right now than having Karl Anthony Towns on the game? Listen, you never say never in the NBA. Things can change
Sure.
dramatically in the offseason, but as of right now, I just don't see what that avenue looks like to move off of Karl Anthony Towns and make the Timberwolves team better, especially as it relates to the Denver Nuggets and what
I
they have to
agree. I
offer.
agree. And the casuals will speak, and everyone has their own opinion. But at the end of the day, if you're the GM there in Tim, like, yeah, how would you maneuver getting over a player like Cat? Switching gears into another player, which I think is a very important piece for the Timberwolves, is Kyle Anderson. He's an unrestricted free agent this summer. His box scores averages this year, they're not going to really surprise you. 6 points, 4 assists, 46% from the field, and 23% from three. So it doesn't really stand out like he's an all-star player, but he brings a lot of intangibles, very similar to Draymond Green in Golden State. What do you think is going to happen with him this offseason? Are the Timberwolves probably going to sign him?
It's a big question. I don't know. That's their big question right now this offseason. I think a lot of that is going to be predicated on, does Kyle Anderson want to take some sort of discount to stay on this team? He maybe hinted at that because he alluded to his son having autism and doing very well here in the school system that he's in Minnesota. Maybe that plays a big role for Kyle in his future here. But I think when you look at the combination of luxury tax issues that are coming up, what he might command in a salary, and in fact, the Wolves are essentially asking him to play out of position as a 3 most of the time. He did very well for them last season because he played the 4 most of the time. That's because Karl was out for 50-plus games with a calf injury. And so Kyle Anderson got plenty of minutes at the 4. This season, he was at the 3, which isn't his natural spot. His shooting doesn't really contribute. He had a wonky offseason a year ago, Denver series last year. He suffered an eye injury, which affected him for several months of the offseason. So he didn't really get to attack his offseason the way that he would have preferred. So I think that carried over into his season this year. Maybe with a better, healthier offseason, he returned a little more to form. But I just think the Wolves, whether it fit or whatever, fit with the roster or whatever, and the cost of maybe bringing him back, I would not be surprised if Kyle Anderson was kind of the one piece of the top 8 that played for them in the playoffs that wasn't back.
Gotcha. I honestly hope that he comes back. I think he's a very important piece for the Timberwolves.
I think they'd like to bring him back, but there's a lot of variables.
Thanks for that insight. That brings a lot of insight into what decisions have to be made this offseason. And in addition to that, too, on this question is, do you think the owners are going to write the check to pay the penalty of being in the luxury tax?
I do think so. I think this is what you have to do in the NBA. This is how it goes. Like, unfortunately, this is how the league is set up, where once you get good, it costs you money to stay good.
Yeah.
And in order to win a title, more often than not, you're going to have to pay the luxury tax or some sort of tax, right? It's very hard to stay under the tax and be a competitive team long enough to win a championship. It's just very hard to do. So I think, yes, a tax bill is coming. I think what you do if you're Minnesota right now is ownership and everybody, you say to yourself, so let's try to run this back one more year, kind of kick the can down the road, pay the luxury tax, however hefty that check might be. Because if you do win a championship, you're not going to mind having paid that luxury tax bill. So I think that's just, to me, where I think this franchise is. Let's try to do this one more year. and see what you got, and then worry about the financial questions
Yeah.
maybe a
Yeah.
year
So
from
what I'm
now.
hearing you say is, yeah, take that risk of writing that check because in return, you might get a championship. And when you do get a championship, you're not going to really worry too much about having wrote a check several months back. And that's the big
Correct.
thing too. It's very similar to, I covered this on the pod last week about owners and how the NBA compared to European soccer and how in that league, owners do not fork up a check and pay a high price for some of these players. You get relegated, you get dinged, and you get relegated to the lower division, and that hurts revenue. And yeah, then it's a tough hill to climb to get promoted back into the Premiership. So I feel like, yeah, if you do want to contend, you do have to spend the money.
You do. If you want to be anything more than an early round playoff team, you're going to have to spend
Yeah.
some money at some point. And the Timberwolves have not been in the luxury tax for the majority of the last couple
Yeah.
decades here. Although all the savings and payments you got from the teams that were in the tax, now is the time
Yes,
to put that money to
exactly.
use.
Exactly. I like that.
Essentially, I think you should look at it as almost like the years you're not in the tax, you're saving, get those savings and use that money for when you have
Yes.
to go into the
Yes.
tax, you're able to pay it. That should
Yes.
be how you view that. But I'm pretty sure I think that's what's
Yeah.
going to happen here.
Yeah.
But
No,
we'll
for
see
sure.
for sure.
Next
Yeah.
question I wanted to ask you is about the NBA Finals. The NBA Finals is starting on Thursday. Celtics and Mavericks, and you covered the Mavericks and Wolves last series, and me and you chatted for a little bit, and you did give me your prediction, but that was right after the series had just ended. Now that you've had the weekend and a couple of days to think about it, who do you have
Yeah.
to win the NBA Finals this year, and why?
Oh man, that's a tough one. Dallas I feel like is just built differently, and their defense has played really well. Of course, there's Luka and Kyrie, but I just looked at Boston's team top to bottom, and it's impressive. I guess I would lightly favor Boston, but man, it's close right now to me. It really is. If these games are close, I think I trust Dallas a little more in late game situations than I do Boston. I think Boston, the combo of obviously Tatum and Brown, but like Drew Holiday and Derek White are two of my
Oh,
favorite
yeah.
players in the league to watch on a nightly basis. I think they're fantastic.
They are.
Like they just know basketball
Mhm.
and play it so well. So I really like those two guys a lot and what they add to the mix there in Boston. And so I guess I'd go Boston just a little.
How many
Dallas.
games?
I'll say
Okay.
6. I'll say 6.
Okay.
87.
And a follow up to that, Finals MVP. Who's your prediction for that one?
I'll say
Okay.
Tatum.
Okay.
I'll say Tatum. Yeah, and I know Brown won the Western or the Eastern Conference honors, but if Boston's winning the title, it's because Jason Tatum probably had a great finals. So I'm gonna say Jason Tatum.
Okay. No, I like that prediction. I'm kind of on the similar fence as well. I've been very critical on Boston. I know they've played a hell of a year, best record at home, all that, and Tatum, All NBA first team. Listen, Jalen Brown should have at least been on the third team. That's what I personally think. From watching these guys, man, JB does so much
Yeah.
for this team, and he really deserves to be on that team. But I've been very critical on Boston and their execution down the stretch. And you alluded to it already is, hey, if these teams are real close in the fourth quarter, we have, a minute, 2 to go and neck to neck, 102, something like that. Which team do I think is more favored to win? I think Dallas. You have two killers there in Luka and Kyrie that can just take over a game. And I would definitely trust them more than JB and JT in Boston.
Yeah. I agree with that 100%.
I definitely think it's going to be an interesting series, though. I don't think it's going to be a cakewalk for any of these two teams. They're definitely going to have to battle throughout the whole series. And PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford got traded at the trade deadline. I know Boston swept the series this year, 2-0. Not so sure if any of those players played on those games. Do you remember if any of those two players played?
I can't recall when Dallas and Boston faced off. But to your point, Dallas a much different team at this point than they were really at any point in the season. They've just been getting better. I feel like as the season has gone, and they close the season so strong. They've obviously played in the playoffs exceptionally well. this group that they have, no matter when Boston faced them, even if it was
Yeah.
early after the trade deadline, probably is still a different team than the one they're about to face.
Yeah, I think everyone's excited. A lot of days without any basketball. I also think I didn't even mention this too, and I kind of want to get your thoughts. But I really think that if Porzingis is not 100% in this series, that the Celtics are not going to win it. They need a healthy Porzingis to be 100%. He's been out with a calf injury, and those are not really easy to get back from. He's going to be playing in game one. It just got reported the other day. But can you give me your thoughts about Porzingis and like his importance to the Boston Celtics roster?
Yeah, gonna be huge. Gonna be huge. We'll see just how good he is coming off that calf injury. Mike Conley was just dealing with one for the Timberwolves here, playing through it, and I know it was bothering him as he was trying to play through it. The tough thing, those are things that can linger, even if you think you've turned a corner and how it feels. You turn one way or twist and all of a sudden the pain comes back. It'd be something worth monitoring is just how effective he is and if he has any setbacks
Yeah,
over the course
yeah,
of the
I
series.
totally agree. And I feel like with big men too, it's the injuries always hit a lot harder for the big guys compared to guards. Just the way that the body is just orchestrated, and it's just yeah, it's a lot harder to bounce back from those kind of injuries as a big man. So yeah, you're right. We're gonna have to really see and monitor.
Yeah.
All right, we're getting towards the end here. Got a couple last questions for you. I did see that you tweeted on Friday after you wrote your last piece um, for the Timberwolves this season. I have a quote here. Just wrapped up writing for the night and just want to say in 14 years of sports writing, this was the most fun I've had covering a season of anybody I've written about. I appreciate all who read and listened along who will continue to do so. Close quote. So can you explain why this season was so different from any other?
Yeah, it was just a lot of fun. You get into sports writing to have moments like this where a team captures the attention of a city and makes a deep playoff run, and it's exciting, and everybody's reading along, and everybody's tuning into every game. And I mean, compare that to some of the years I've covered the Timberwolves, where by March everybody was checked out and just waiting for the lottery balls to turn up.
Yeah.
It's a different feeling and a much more rewarding one as a writer when you get stuff like this to cover as opposed to a team
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, and with a lot of teams during the end of the season, for teams that are not going to make the playoffs, the Wizards and all these other teams, Memphis, you can just definitely tell like these guys are just ready for vacation. So when they make a deep playoff push, yeah, that definitely makes your job more exciting, and all the hype and all the excitement too within the city, places that you go, people I'm sure rocking Timberwolves gear and again, really hyped up for, the playoffs. So yeah, that's understandable. All right. Next question here. Last two questions and then I'll get you out. I appreciate your time. I do see that you're a big Mariah Carey fan and Carole King fan. It's not a secret. You have it even in your bio to let everyone know this is what I'm about.
Right.
So yeah, talk to us about your love for both of these ladies and your favorite song. These
From
musicians,
each of them?
yes.
Yeah. Oh, see, now you're asking the questions I really like. I fell in love with Mariah when I was young. And her Fantasy video came out when I was about 8 years old, and I've been a fan of hers ever since. Her Daydream album was the first album I ever bought. That was way back when. And then Carole King, my love for her came along when I was a little older, 15 or so. And I started playing the piano and, getting really interested in writing music for the first time in my life. And I heard her Tapestry album and it just completely blew my mind. Like, these were all like classic songs that I had known. It's an album full of songs that you've heard, that you've likely heard before. You just didn't realize that like the same person did them all and they were all on the same album. That's what blew my mind about her. And then just researching her career, she was such a prolific, legendary songwriter, in addition to being a successful singer. And I just thought it was the coolest thing ever to be like this. Not that she was unrecognized, but like most people don't know, if you don't know that she was like this legendary songwriter that wrote so many classic songs for so many artists in the 60s before becoming a singer in her own right. And I just thought that was the coolest thing ever.
That is pretty cool.
And they became my favorite. For my favorite songs by each, for Mariah, I would say We Belong Together
Oh
is
man,
probably
you
my
stole my
favorite
thunder.
song. And then
Yeah.
and Carol has a song called Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow? And the Shirelles had a big hit with it in
Okay.
1960. She wrote it for them with her then husband at the time, and it's a classic song. And I think it's one of the best pop songs ever
Gotcha. Yeah,
made.
I actually love the Shirelles. I'll actually have to look up more information on Carol because I got to be honest, I'm a little bit of a casual. Like I've definitely heard of her. And I'm sure.
That's okay. But most people are when it
Yeah.
comes to Carole King's music.
No, I
But do a
will.
quick Google search and read her Wikipedia page, and
Yeah.
you'll get the rundown of just why. She's only one of 3 women that's ever been inducted into the
Oh
Rock and Roll Hall of
wow,
Fame
really?
twice. Once for her songwriting career, and then
Oh
once for her
wow,
career as a solo
wow.
artist. So yeah,
Not to
that's
put
how
you on the
big she
spot, but
is.
who are the other two?
Stevie Nicks and
Okay.
Tina Turner. So Stevie Nicks for being
Yeah.
part of Fleetwood Mac and then a solo artist, and Tina Turner for being part of Ike and Tina and
Gotcha.
then as a
Gotcha.
solo
Okay.
artist.
No, that's great. I
Yeah.
was gonna guess Diana
hmm
Ross, but yeah, no, that's pretty good company there.
No, Diana Ross probably should be in as a solo artist. In addition to she's already in
Yeah.
as part of the Supremes, obviously, but she should probably also
Yeah.
be in as a solo artist. If like 30 men can be in twice, we can get more
Yeah.
than 3 women into
Yeah.
the Rock
Let's
and Roll
give
Hall of
some of
Fame
our
twice.
love to the
Yeah,
women too. Yeah. No, I totally agree. I totally agree.
that's
Totally
right.
agree.
That's right.
All right. No, thanks for that perspective. I'll definitely do some more research on Carol. Last question I wanted to get you out on. I know it's summertime for you, spending time with loved ones and family, and very demanding job here, Chris. After their clocks hit double zeros, and you have to get to your writing, and you have strict deadlines to meet, traveling. What are you most looking forward to this summer?
I'm writing that
hmm
book. That's going to be whether I'm looking forward to it or not, which I
Yeah.
am, which I very much am looking forward to writing the book. It's just going to be a very intense process, I feel like. I'm going to take a little break here over the next like 2
Yeah.
weeks, see some family, see some friends. But then once that's over, we're pedal back on the floor and full steam ahead through the summer working on this book and covering the
Yeah, no,
Timberwolves off season.
that's understandable. What I'm hearing you say is you're gonna definitely unwind for a little bit, but once the time gets over, you're gonna definitely, rank it up a little bit and start getting to the book. So, no, no, for sure, Chris. Well, I
100%. Yeah.
appreciate your time, sir. I know we probably went over for what I requested here as far as minutes goes.
No problem. No problem. I
Yeah, no,
enjoyed the
thank you.
chat.
You have a good rest of your day and the rest of your week, and enjoy your vacation with your loved one. Yeah, of
Appreciate
course.
you
All
having
right,
me on.
Chris.
Thank you.